huge misunderstanding around communication, stated intent, huge risk around coercion. That could be coercion into good things or bad things. And the problem that we felt that the Mental Capacity Act, as the sort of named safeguard for this, was going to cause a problem was because the bill sponsors thought that people with Down syndrome would largely be disapplied from this legislation because of the mental capacity.
What we're talking about, which is a healthcare system that will, at the end of the day, judge the value of somebody's life on their productivity, on their activity, on their efficiency.
Welcome to the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. We are the most recognised and respected organisation campaigning for your right to informed consent, bodily autonomy and medical choice. We are the voice of ethical medicine.
I just want everybody who's watching this video and seeing our others, please like and subscribe. I know we always say this, but it really helps us. And there will be a QR code sitting at the top right-hand side of the screen where you can flash your phone at that, and that means you can buy us a coffee, or you can make monthly donations if you wish to, which would be really, really helpful. And if you're not a QR code user, you just drop down into the description and then you will see that the link is there for you.
So, Ken, you've very eloquently described how decision-making does not happen in isolation, but within relationships of trust, support and interdependence. So coming to you, George, for disabled people, especially those who rely on the significant care and support of others, sometimes for many years, how might perceptions of burden and the influence of those on whom they depend impact decision-making?
There isn't a disabled person that I know. I don't think there is a disabled person that hasn't at one point in their life felt burden. It's just, it's sadly a universal. There is the statistics around the number of carers that have to give up work in order to just basically do the bureaucratic maze hell of organising support, doctors, and and sadly it's a full-time job. And in the 1970s, radical feminists were talking about a domestic wage, and I would advocate for that because caring is work, and it's people that are doing it don't see it as work because they're doing it out of love, but it is work. It is onerous. It's hard, the fear on both sides of this that nobody's going to care for my son, daughter when I'm no longer around. I think, and maybe Ken's more accurately and better place to talk about this. Every parent I know of a child with a learning disability or complex needs has put their house into trust, and one of the first things that parents do is adjust their wills to make their assets secure, so that their child has care and shelter and things. These are conversations that happen on a day-to-day basis in families with a disabled individual in them. That's because it is just seen to be a fact that there is no support. There is it is bare out there. The social infrastructure, particularly after austerity and all of these things, doesn't exist. So if the parents and the family don't do it, a lot of these families are currently in a black hole, entering a black hole, and that is what proponents of this bill are taking advantage of, because they know that there's no other choice. So however you've got two things going on here. It is considered discriminatory to not give a disabled person access to something, no matter how discriminatory that practice itself is. So no matter how bad, how dystopian the practice, it's discriminatory not to open the door. So if you were opening the door to a burning building to all of the able-bodied people, it would be discriminatory not to open the door to the wheelchair user. And I know that sounds, perhaps fanciful, but that's how it works. But then you also have the kind of illusion of choice. Now, it will be the case, if this passes, that assisted suicide is the only choice available, because 100,000 people a year die without palliative care. And we're not funding palliative care, and every hospice that I know is currently doing redundancy allowance. So let's not propose this because it is the only choice available. And, I would prefer no choice, to be honest. I would prefer no choice and a long-term plan collectively about how we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole, whereby 1 in 4 people who are disabled, who are living in poverty, are disabled. There are better instruments to this. How are we going to change universal credit? How are we going to change personal independence payment? How are we going to redesign social care? How are we going to make sure that everybody has universal access to palliative care? And why are we proposing this before that? Cart before horse.
Absolutely, George. I mean, you've led to my next question, really. I did want to talk briefly about DNARs and how and the impact of those. Can I just have one sentence from you each on that, and then we're going to move on to palliative care and back to the bill itself as it comes to Parliament. Ken,
A complete misuse. Yeah, it's a tool. If you've had the misfortune of going into a hospital and being kept in a trolley, and you're over a certain age, you'll be asked several times to consent to a DNR. And, so that's without having a learning disability. So you could just be vulnerable, frightened, and you find yourself in hospital. So I think personally, they're a complete abuse of the process, because the last thing you want to hear when you're in hospital is someone saying to you, they're not going to do everything they can to save your life.
Yeah. It's very disingenuous, isn't it? Because, I mean, of course, as we've discussed and before in this series, and it's a point that we talked about, Liz, in some detail, with the DNARs, it used to be meaning do not jump on my chest. And, but now it's come to be a way to withdraw care from somebody in need of care and treatment. And very, very, and we know what happened during COVID when these blanket DNARs were imposed on disabled people with learning disabilities, and the elderly. No consent from the family at all. George, very, very briefly, just one sentence, if you may.
I'm just going to say, look back at Lady May's speech on the first day of committee stage in the House of Lords. Look back at that, because one of the 3 points that she made in a 90-second speech, it wasn't much longer than that, was that this makes medical malpractice easier and harder to spot, because what you are doing is creating a norm whereby or a new norm whereby it is acceptable in some circumstances for a medical professional to end life. And so how are we going to differentiate in future, if this bill passes, the harm, the mistakes, the accountability, the malpractice against the autonomy, the wish, the freedom and it was Alex Ruck-Keene who, as at the same kind of committee stage as Ken so eloquently contributed to, that said, I have got to advise and write and lecture and teach the new generation of mental health practitioners, when are they following the framework of the Mental Capacity Act, and when are they following the framework of the terminally ill adults end of life bill, and people will take advantage, and they already do, of the fork in the road, and so every day, in any circumstance where this bill applies, there will be a decision made. Do I want this person to live, or do I think it's better that they die? And actually, that will not be a consensual decision. That will be a medical decision.
So the DNARs, it was so shocking how the DNARs were blanket put on disabled people and learning disabilities in COVID. I think that's what shows that we live in a society which has an underlying deep-seated prejudice against disabled people, and that when the chips are down, when there's an emergency, whatever, suddenly you're showing that you don't value those people the same, because there was no logical reason. Those people were no more at risk from COVID than anyone else, or so but it showed that prejudice and that deep-seated problem. I think, and this is the problem, we have a dystopian bill, which is assuming a completely utopian society where everybody is equally valued, everybody, has the same dignity, everybody has the same access, everyone has complete and 100% freedom of choice. And that's just never going to happen, because it so obviously doesn't happen. And the only other thing about DNARs is it's not just a withdrawal of treatment, it's an actively adding in drugs that bring about the end of life, the midazolam, the morphine. So that has been the beginning of the slippery slope to euthanasia, and how quickly nurses and doctors become desensitized. So probably what's felt a bit uncomfortable to start with is now the norm. You get people fighting, nurses saying, no, I don't want my parents put on this, these drugs. But these people are like, no, but this is what we do. This is the protocol. And this is exactly what happened. Yeah. Yeah. And what will happen with assisted suicide is, in a situation where you've got limited funds, limited resources, somebody who is able-bodied thinking, well, this person's quality of life maybe isn't that great. And it's going to be a quick fix, a quick, cheap fix that people will very quickly become desensitized to. And you see that in Canada. Within 10 years, people are literally being offered MAID for everything. Poverty, disabilities, young people, healthy people who just have maybe some cerebral palsy. If they suddenly have an issue, they're offered that straight away. I mean, so the slippery slope happens. There's no way to avoid it. We have to hold the line.
And Liz, may I say, that one of the words that has been most twisted is progressive. Okay, when you go to the doctor and they say you've got a progressive condition, most people go out of the surgery or the consultation room weeping, because they know what that means. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Yet in ideological terms, anything progressive is often seen to be an advancement, better, and simply, this is what I would say. What is progressive about 60 women with anorexia dying across the world? And it's never really the anorexia that kills them in the end. It is the heart failure, the lung failure, the fact that this mental condition they've got has created physical implications. What is progressive about, as this bill stands, not giving advocates and parents any sight of or any real involvement in a process whereby it is quite legitimate that for the first time that you hear that your loved one has died is when they send you their ashes in the post? What but what is also progressive about what we're talking about, which is a healthcare system that will, at the end of the day, judge the value of somebody's life on their productivity, on their activity, on their efficiency, and that's
And their
where,
cost to the NHS.
and
But I
within the
think there's a
NHS,
really good point on that around, when you look at language, screening for Down syndrome came about in 1968. Generally, you screen for things that you're looking to treat, or you're looking, it's not normally a positive thing, yet it's still seen as being something which is routinely offered and is a precursor for 90% of terminations of fetuses with Down syndrome when a positive result comes back, because the NHS still hasn't worked out how to actually accept that that's still a great life. And actually they want to try and frame it in a way, which, it insinuates their view around a quality of life based on a single piece of binary information.
Let's not beat around the bush here. What we're talking about is eugenics. Okay, what we're talking about is a eugenical practice, and that is a key statistic that Ken's just talked about around the terminations of fetuses with Down syndrome. In Belgium and in the Netherlands, it is legal to apply for assisted suicide at 12 and 16 respectively. And
you can euthanize children in Holland. So you can euthanize up to the age of 5.
Yes. And basically, therefore, what you're talking about, in my eyes, is post-birth termination, and that is that's dangerous. And I do actually think that what you're opening the gates to is everybody saying it's just too difficult to care for disabled people. It's just too difficult for me to get out of bed in the morning. It's and taking them to the only solution that you care about and can think of. That's what we're talking about, and have been fighting against ever, for 100 years. For 100 years, this is we've been debating this for pretty much 100 years in Britain, and we haven't moved forward. This is very much a Victorian, dull, Dickensian view of what brings value to life.
And just stopping you there, George, as we're running desperately out of time. Absolutely, George. And I think, Liz and you both brought up the question of assisted dying is already happening. So in that context, where doctors are already making decisions about whose life is worthy of resources, whose life has value, has quality, and making decisions on the back of it, which are, as you say, eugenicist decisions. Given all that, given the flaws, lacunas, and all the wrongful assumptions that are written into this bill as it's drafted now, do you believe there is sufficient understanding among parliamentarians, particularly in the Commons? Well, let's remember that in the Commons there was little scrutiny, very little amendment, a lot of amendments in the Lords, a lot of scrutiny in the Lords, but those amendments were rejected, all but 3. And so given all that context, do you think there's a sufficient understanding amongst our parliamentarians of the inequalities, of those assumptions, of the dangers? And in that context, what would you say to MPs now returning in September, on the 11th of September, when this bill comes back to Parliament? What would you say to them ahead of that to focus their minds on what needs to happen? First you, Ken, and then you, George. Thank you.
I would say to every parliamentarian coming back who is wavering on this, they need to go and speak to disabled groups. They cannot take their knowledge in a distilled form from social media or from sound bites. They actually need to go and speak to people, who have direct lived experience and are voicing real and genuine concern. The Commons largely rely on the Lords to scrutinise a lot of things, and they can't just think it's someone else's problem. The same point as the peers cannot think that someone else will come up with a workable solution that won't create an environment which wasn't envisaged in the first place. So they need to be informed, and the information cannot come third hand from sound bites and slogans. They need to go and speak to some people.
I would point them towards what Caroline from Age UK said when she was giving evidence. Age UK have a helpline, and the week after this was passed in the Commons, because older people may not. I mean, who does understand our parliamentary system? A week afterwards, they had people calling their hotline, their helpline, wanting this. And asking for it, and in that context, I would say to any sitting constituency MP, where your surgery is oversubscribed with people that need access to housing, need access to healthcare, need access, do you really want, in 6 months' time, a year's time, in 5 years' time, someone sitting in front of you who asking for your help as a constituency MP to die? And what would you say to them? And on the flip side of that coin, what would you say to the individual who turns up at your surgery and says, I think my mother, father, wife wants me gone. Can you help? It's not an easy job being a parliamentarian, and I'm not going to criticize them. But if you vote for this is not the end of the story. You're actually going to be, as a public servant, going to be asked questions about how and where and why you can give people access to this, and that will happen on your turf, your streets, especially the neighbourhoods that are the poorest. It will be the Stockton-upon-Tees and the rural parts of Cornwall and the left behind communities that get hit the most. Diane Hayter and all of these people. They live in leafy Kentish town with in their urban environments where you do have access to transportation, where you do have access to leisure and all of these things. That they want it for their own reasons, dare I say, and because they believe that they're dying anyway. But that's not in reality what's going to happen here. It's going to happen more in the communities and for the people who we have failed for generations. And what are our serving parliamentarians going to say when they are going to be asked to be a part of that process?
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming on and sharing your insights and concerns with us. It's been a really, really useful conversation. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was a really powerful conversation, and it was just, you made some incredibly insightful, powerful points, which, people need to hear. So, and just really encouraging people to lobby your MPs. We've got an Reject Assisted Suicide campaign page, which has template letters from people like Right to Life. We need to keep lobbying our MPs. There is this key critical vote on the 11th of September. I know there's going to be a protest outside Parliament that day, so just watch this space. We'll advertise things once we know all the details. but yeah, we cannot let this bill continue. This needs to be ended once and for all, because this is an ethical Rubicon that really, we as a society, we cannot afford to cross. So thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, George. Thank you, Ken. And
My
amazing
pleasure.
work. Thank you for all your great work. And Amanda, thanks for leading this.
With heartfelt thanks to Ken and to George, to Amanda and Liz, I'm just bowled over by the content of what you've just seen. That's 20 minutes of a conversation that actually went on for well over an hour. The other 40 minutes or so is available in 2 separate chunks. Please dig them out and have a look. Go to our YouTube or our Substack and you can find the videos, or go on audio to Spotify on Apple and you can watch it there. Please, you've got to see the whole thing. It's so important. And many people just do not realize the ramifications of the terminally ill bill.